Hello, Claire. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hello, thank you for asking me. Delighted to be with you.
Well, listen, this is going to be just a chat among friends, really. It's not going to be a proper podcast, is it? Let's be honest, because we've got so much to catch up on. But let's talk a little bit about The Apprentice. We have to talk about that because that brought us to you and brought you to us. What would you say was the biggest lesson that you learned from that experience?
Probably the biggest lesson was when I entered the apprentice experience. I'd always worked for people. I'd been an employee. I'd climbed the corporate ladder in the FMCG sector very quickly, from being on a graduate scheme up to the next step was director level at the age of 28. And then leaving the apprentice, it was really my first exposure. I've been with entrepreneurs, people running small businesses, obviously having a lot of contact with Alan Sugar. And leaving the experience, I felt that I didn't want to be an employee. I didn't know what I wanted to do in terms of a business. That's the $1 million question. Starting a business is where is the idea? Where's going to be your unique selling point? But that was probably, aside from being thrown into the public eye, learning about the media world, learning about journalists, I actually learned a lot about myself in terms of, I think Alan Sugar, I'm the only person he's thrown out of the boardroom for talking without firing. So I've learned to listen a lot more, but definitely going from being an employee to an employer was the biggest life change.
Yeah, and that's fascinating that you say that because, of course, it's changed now, The Apprentice, hasn't it? Before it was about going to work as Sir Alan's apprentice, Lord Sugar's apprentice, and then it became about people going in with their own business ideas. It's much more focusing on him investing in the individuals and their entrepreneurial journey. So for you, it was like, well, what will I do now that I've decided I'm unemployable? What shall I? And you started School Speakers, which has been a huge success. But where did that idea come from?
So having learned to actually listen, because I think probably like most people watching, listening to this, we're speakers, we do love to talk and we often forget we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. I listened to the advice I had from Sir Alan and the producers was do not take any job offers. I was offered to do more reality TV, lots and lots of exciting opportunities for sort of 3 to 6 months after the show. And in that window, I was asked to go speak in schools. I'd never been into schools since I'd left my own school. My background's not education. My family are teachers. And I was asked to go speak at school in Blackpool to a group of girls. And I said, well, what do you want me to speak about? And they said, you're a great role model, which was a phrase not often used 10, 11 years ago, whereas now role models is a hashtag on Twitter and used every day. And I can remember going in to meet these girls who were year 9, 10 and 11, so 13 to 16, left the school and I had what I call the buzz. I think entrepreneurs, speakers, we all do it because we've got that passion, we love to do it. And it literally snowballed from that first experience thinking, I've really enjoyed it. Hopefully they enjoyed it. And I had great feedback. I started doing more and more and then started offering work to other people when it wasn't sustainable for myself on business and enterprise because obviously there's just me. I couldn't be in 6 places at once across the country. And then literally the light bulb moment, spotted a gap in the market to put other speakers, different categories, science, creativity, Black History Month. Anyone with children will know the amount of events which happen in schools. And I came up with School Speakers. So very simple. Again, I'd listened to Alan Sugar, keep it simple. So School Speakers was born 10 years ago.
Perfect. And it says exactly what it does on the tin, which is brilliant. You know exactly what it's about. So your interest in young people, did that come from going into schools? Because you're passionate, and I know you advise government with regards to young people and to women. Did that passion come from that, or is it because you're young?
I think I had there were two parts to it. That one, I am very driven by challenge and by change. I think as an entrepreneur, I get great satisfaction seeing ideas come to life and seeing results and impact. And that's exactly the same working with young people. You have raw talent. In 45 minutes, you can see changes in a classroom. So that was a real tick the box for me. But also, I'd reached an age of wanting, I wasn't particularly driven by material items and money. I definitely want to make a social impact and some form of legacy. And actually, I know that I'm driven every day by going to work and making a difference, which might sound cheesy to some people when we've all got different motivators and different buttons to press. But I do like a purpose and knowing that the work we're doing is, without a doubt, making a difference for thousands of young people across the country.
That's lovely. And I can hear your passion, and anybody listening will hear your passion. It's fantastic. So tell me, I mean, you juggle so many things. So you're a mum, you're an entrepreneur running your business. You're also a speaker. You advise government. You broadcast. How do you do that? Are you superwoman?
No, not at all, not at all. I'm ridiculously organised, and I'd say a no to a lot of things. That was probably one of the difference having a child, where before I used to be able to do everything, go to all the events I wanted to do all the travelling I wanted to do. I'd be able to pop to London, pop to a different European city. Those things don't happen so much anymore. But I prioritise the things which I want to do, and if they're important to me, I do them. And I say no to other things which I would, in an ideal world, if I had a mountain of time, I would do, but I can't do everything. So I have a very clear working life and a very clear home life. I've got a good work-life balance. I think my daughter was maybe 2 or 3 when she asked me if I slept at work. And that was a bit of a, she said, Mummy, is your bed in the office? And that was a bit of a wake-up call that you need to have, I think, the ability as you move through your career and your work life increases, or your role increases, and the pressure and the stress, the ability to turn your light on at work and then your light off at home.
Oh, that's really good advice. That's such good advice. Anybody who's watching this on video rather than listening to podcasts will know that you're being video bombed by the most attractive little dog. So tell us, what is your little doggy? What's his or her name?
My little dog is called Martha. She is a French bulldog, but she's quite special in the fact she was the runt of the litter, the last one left. She probably doesn't look the same as other French bulldogs because she's so small, but she's small with a very big personality. And she's actually goes into school. She's on the reading to dog scheme, so she reads. She obviously doesn't do the reading. The students read to her, which is great for dogs because they love being read to, but it's really aids young people in their reading because obviously dogs don't judge. They're good at reading to dogs. So she comes everywhere. She's coming to a school with me this Friday.
I love the fact that your dog is on your payroll. That's fantastic. That's absolutely brilliant. Mine is too. My dog is my head of security. He's retiring. He's actually got an apprentice. Which is great because I'm talking to obviously the runner up. The apprentice is not so good, but anyway, we're getting there. So we digress. I want to talk about women here because obviously as a speaker, we've worked together where we've booked you to speak for our clients. And I don't know if you're aware of this, and it's a scary statistic. 70% of speakers globally are actually male. And in the UK, it's worse than that. It's 75%. And of course, I'm just talking about male and female. I know there's 72 genders according to Facebook, but I haven't got the stats for that. But I don't know if this should be happening in this day and age. And do you have any thoughts as to why there isn't a better balance?
It's frustrating. I think there's, in terms of role models, there's some amazing female speakers. So there are people out there showing other people how to do it. There are definitely the opportunities. We receive so many inquiries we don't just do student talks, we do teacher, CPD, conference speakers, and often they want a female speaker because they've always had a male speaker. So there are the opportunities, there are the role models, there are the gaps in the market. It's this pipeline of female speakers who are probably amazing at their subjects, just need to step forward, literally put their neck on the line and just go for it. I know that at the moment, lots of people talk about imposter syndrome, that lots of women don't feel that they're good enough, which is fairly alien to me because the upbringing I had and the school I went to, we were, from a very young age, it was drilled into us that there was no differentiation between boys and girls and men and women. It was a level playing field. There were no barriers to success and you could do anything you wanted to do. But in the last 10 to 15 years, I feel that we've gone backwards slightly. And there are those stereotypes appearing that if you want a really good keynote conference speaker, well, automatically it would be a man who's written a book. And it should be, that stereotype shouldn't exist because that's not the rule. It's an open playing field in the speakers market, and it is frustrating that we don't have more senior women stepping up to do speaking.
Okay, well, that's a call out. I think both of us agree we would like more women, and I think it's a very complicated discussion. And it's interesting what you say about the imposter syndrome, because I never had that either. And somebody asked me the other day and said, as a woman running businesses, did you ever think you had to behave differently? I thought, I didn't even think of myself as a woman running a business. I thought of myself as a business owner. I never put myself in a box. And I think you've done the same. You've not put yourself in a box. You just behave as you. It's you, isn't it? It's not like you don't think, oh, I'm female, I must do it this way. But anyway, we could have a much longer discussion about that. But you mentioned that you provide speakers not only for schools, but also for the teacher conferences. And I know you work with universities and colleges. What's the challenge with regards to budgets for speakers? Because I'm sure that it's very different. In the corporate world, the fees can be very high for speakers. What's it like in your world?
I always say to speakers when they approach us, and we do have several applications, sort of 40 to 50 applications a month come through for school speakers. Speaking in schools or the educational sector, because it's schools, colleges, universities, PRUs, prisons, virtual schools, technology colleges, so many different channels of education now, that their budgets are significantly lower versus the corporate market. However, there are 70,000 schools in the country, so it's a lower fee but higher volume business model. So as a speaker, some speakers are very successful in differentiating how their marketing material, how they speak to different markets, the corporate sector and the educational sector, and in line with that, they have different fees. So I know a couple of my speakers are on several agency books and bureaus, but there is no overlap, there's no competition between the agencies because they've got different keynote talks, different strategies, different pricing, a completely different approach to schools. And particularly working with the public sector, the positives are they're always going to be there. We're always going to have young people, we're always going to have schools. They are not going to have the same budgets as corporates. That's just the reality check. So really, sort of fee-wise, when we're doing student talks, our average fee for an hour is £250 to say £500 plus travel. Teacher CPD, £500 to £1,000, and then conference speakers, £1,000 to £3,000. So in my world and my value of money, I still think that's a lot of money. But I appreciate for a keynote speaker who receives £15,000 from a corporate, they might look at those figures and think it's not for them. And as a speaker, you need to know where you sit, what you feel comfortable doing. If you don't want to work with schools, nobody's forcing your hand, don't do it.
I think in some ways it must be harder to work with school audiences, surely.
I think they are the toughest audience. You've got to remember, I think, as a corporate keynote speaker, all those people actually want to be there. They want to listen to you. In a school, you can walk into particularly year 10 and year 11. They're in the peak of teenagerism. And they'll be sat there thinking, who's this? I don't want to listen. I don't want to be here. Probably the chances that you're being a speaker brought in is to maybe motivate them, inspire them, engage them in school. So you're already up against it, that they don't want to be sat in those seats. And it's so important as a speaker in schools, you have a strong introduction. If you don't get your audience in first 5 minutes, it's game over. I've seen it so many times in schools where a speaker will come on and they don't connect with the students. And you can see them glazing over, and it's quite painful to watch.
That's fascinating. I mean, I would be petrified. I have actually signed up to go back as an alumni of my school to say if you ever want me to come and speak. But if they called upon me, I think I'll have to talk to you. But anyway, what makes a great speaker then for schools? Is it somebody that has that ability to connect, or is it a certain profile? Is it a certain topic? Is it a certain attitude? What does the perfect speaker look like?
I think the good thing about school speakers is that we have 600 speakers, and we have such a diverse pool of speakers that we can address all the diverse needs of schools, because one size doesn't fit all. I would say general traits which are very popular: lots of energy, lots of drive, a subject which they're interested in, the way that it's delivered, i.e. not death by PowerPoint, lots of visuals, interactive. So maybe not necessarily a workshop, because a workshop you could maybe do with 50 students or less, and a year group you could have 200-300 students in a large secondary school. But engaging with your audience, including them, speaking in their language. And I'm not saying going in and trying to speak like a teenager, because you could look ridiculous doing that. But being relatable is really key to them. I mean, the popular topics we have at the moment are anything around addiction, drugs, alcohol, sex, pornography, gang culture, knife crime, which lots of people are stereotyped. They think it just happens in London. We receive inquiries for all the big cities across the country. General brief coming through is role models, aspiration, and yes, it's got to be interesting for the students, but ultimately remember the person booking you is a teacher. So if you as a speaker have a story that you say that you didn't really work hard at school, you were not successful at school, but look at me, I'm still a great success, the chances are they are not going to book you, because they want their students to work really hard at school and focus on delivering good educational results.
Do you know what? Your topics are far more interesting than ours in the corporate world. I mean, sex, pornography, drugs, addiction. Wow. So anyway, fantastic. So tell me about lead times then. How much time do you have when a school comes to you or a college comes to you? What's the average time you've got to find someone?
We have a service called SOS, Speaker on Standby, which when the business first launched, I said, let's, just as an idea, because we do receive lots of inquiries where a school has been let down by a speaker, whether the speaker's ill or personal circumstances. You know, for both you and I, our product is human beings, and human beings are not lumps of plastic or not machines and robots, and things do happen. I would say 20% of my business is by last minute inquiries, and by last minute, I think the shortest turnaround we had was 11 o'clock at night, a phone call back from a school which came through to me at home for a speech day at 12 o'clock the next day, where their speaker was poorly and couldn't make the event. We have inquiries 48 hours turnaround, and then other schools will book a sixth form lecture programme for the next. We're working on programmes now for the next academic year. So they really do vary, but it's so imperative. I think for being a speaker, there's two parts of the equation. One, of course, is arriving at the venue and doing a fantastic keynote session, which ticks all the boxes, and we get great feedback. But the other part of the equation is the business etiquette with being a speaker. So picking up the phone, replying to your emails, being on the ball. You know, if you want the work, you've got to be proactive and you've got to be professional. So when we're chasing last minute inquiries and I say to a speaker, I've sent you an email this morning, are you available tomorrow? Oh yes, I've seen that email. Can you reply? Can you tell me if you're available? And I think over the last year, 18 months, it's become more and more apparent from the schools we're working with, and we do work with some corporates as well, that if they find it difficult working with a speaker, it doesn't matter how great their keynote speech is, they won't work with them, because they don't want to work with somebody who's a pain in the backside and they have to chase. And that's really, as an agency, the point I'm getting to. If I have to chase people, I think, well, if I have to chase them, my client's probably going to have to chase them, and it's not a good reflection on my business, and I won't work with them.
Absolutely. And we have the same thing when a speaker promises a presentation in advance and then you have to chase, or they delay, and then it causes ripple effects down the line. Do you get asked for presentations in advance as well at schools, or is that not the same thing?
More so on the conference side, where they will ask for ahead of time if they're setting up a deck of presentations, not necessarily to look at the content. Very infrequently are we might be asked for a speaker to give a couple of bullet points about what their key message is, but the speaker will always contact the client ahead of the event and have a conversation about key messages, and at that point they'll have a conversation about their presentation. I often say, you mentioned titles earlier in the conversation, that people ask me what I do. I say I'm a nagger. I am nagging for a living, because really there is no reason why people should use my service versus going to a speaker directly. But they use school speakers because it's a convenient umbrella. They can access 600 speakers via us, and we are really fantastic at admin, and we're very professional, we're very efficient. People are often quite surprised when we answer the phone and they say, thank you so much for answering. Of course we're going to answer the phone, but that's because some speakers do have a bad reputation, that they don't answer phones, Probably one of my biggest pet hates are voicemails who say, please don't leave me a voicemail because I don't check my messages. For goodness sake, bang my head against a brick wall. Why have you got a mobile phone if people can't leave you a message?
Absolutely. Listen, you're speaking my language. I'm sitting here like going, yeah, thumbs up, and totally agreeing with you. So let me ask you a question. So when I have a client come to me for the corporate world, we always give them a choice and a selection of speakers that they can then say, this is my first choice, my second choice, etc. Do you do the same, or do you say this is the right person for you and this is who I recommend?
I would say 20 about a fifth of our inquiries come in whether the school or the client knows who they want. So they will have seen a keynote speaker, they will have been recommended in schools. I'd probably say the only form of marketing which works is word of mouth. You can try everything else, but recommendations is absolutely key. So in the other 80% where they give us a brief and say what they want to achieve, we will then put together a list of speakers for them, and I will offer them various, a low, a medium and a high price point, because often it's the chicken and the egg. We'll say, have you got an idea of your budget? We start from £250 up to say £3,000. Well, what can we get for our budget? So we will send them a range of maybe 6 to 8 speaker links with the fees to give them your entry price point, medium to high, and then they will come back and we check availability.
Yeah, it's very similar to how we work, actually. So it's interesting. There's so many parallels. It's just a different end market, isn't it? Have you seen changes in the speaking industry? And you've been in it for 10 years. I've been in it for 25. What sort of changes have you seen in that time, would you say?
I've noticed in the last 12 to 18 months that educational budgets are our educational budgets. We're working with public sector, but we are constantly being squeezed at the moment where people want more for less. So there is still budgets. People sometimes make the assumption that we work with private schools because they've got higher fees. We work with state schools where they pay for their speakers via pupil premium. People don't know what pupil premium is. They need to Google it because it's funding schools receive to raise aspiration. And instead of 2 years ago, they would pay for £500 for a keynote talk. They would like an assembly and a keynote talk and then a workshop afterwards. So there is still the funding, but they just squeeze. And also I've noticed a difference in attitude with some of the speakers, not the what I would say more experienced, older professional speakers, the newer speakers coming into the market, the under 30s, under 25, completely different attitude to I would say their professionalism, in terms of they seem more happy to drop out of events, less sense of an integrity, bit more of a flyaway attitude, but what I would say in the north of England, a bit slack in terms of admin, phone numbers not up to date, bank details not correct on invoices, just the really small things which when you're running a business and agency start adding up actually cause you headaches. And that is a big difference which I have seen with younger speakers. But for me, younger speakers do appeal to the school market, addressing a younger audience. So I do feel that there is, and I don't think it's isolated to the speaking industry. From talking to friends in every sector, they all find the under 30s to be fairly similar.
Wow, that's frightening. That's interesting. So the trends you're seeing with regards to clients wanting more bang for their buck, more value add, we're seeing that as well in the corporate world. We haven't seen so much of the professionalism that you're talking about there, but we haven't got as many younger speakers coming up, and that's a problem in the corporate world. You do need to see those speakers, and they do need to, you're right, it has to be professional. That's really fascinating. So what would you say, what advice would you give to somebody booking a speaker from you to get the best out of that experience, to get the best value from it? What can they do?
We always say to her when somebody inquires with us, the more information they can give us, the better. Because I appreciate when I started rewinding to 10 years ago, starting school speakers, one of the reasons I started it was seeing a friend who was a deputy head. Her desk was covered, a typical teacher desk, in post-it notes and piles of papers. And she was scrambling around trying to find a speaker, and it's the time. So for coming to us, I appreciate that teachers don't have a huge amount of time and that things are often done in quite a rush, but often we receive briefs which are 4 words. You know, we need a speaker. What's the purpose of the speaker? Is there an aim? We have teachers texting us. We have them emailing, ringing us after hours when they're not teaching, because I appreciate that if they're in a building, one, they might not have phone reception, because often schools don't have any phone reception, and they might not even have the time to speak or even think about it during their working day. So that's one of the other things, is actually being accessible and speaking to people. I spoke to a teacher last night at 7 o'clock and it was a 2-minute conversation, but she really appreciated me speaking to her after hours when she could actually have a conversation. So being able to give us a brief and being able to give us a budget is really useful, because often we go through a full inquiry and then they say, we haven't got that budget. So we don't want to show them. It's almost, you don't want to go shopping in Gucci if you've got a Primark budget. We don't want to dangle the carrot and then it's unaffordable towards them. The other thing we've noticed is lots of schools now clustering together to book speakers, particularly a big keynote speaker for a teacher conference or a head teacher or an SLT, senior leadership gathering. They will all put some money into their pot to share that speaker.
I think that's a really good idea. And I think it's something actually that small businesses should do as well, to get, the top level person come together as a group, put your budgets together and get some. I think that's an excellent idea. It's something that I think businesses should also do. That's great. Fascinating hearing about that. So I've got 2 more questions for you. One is, if your clients are so busy, they haven't even got time to pick up the phone, does that mean you don't actually do any outward marketing to them? You just wait for them to come to you? Because of course you can't really just call them up and say, are you planning? I mean, we would call people up and say, are you planning anything? When are you starting to plan the next event? When do you want us to contact you? I imagine you can't do that, can you?
Schools are a completely different market. So after coming in from a corporate sector and then being in the educational sector, I wouldn't even say it's a learning curve, it's a learning cliff. You are thrown into this different world and you quickly climb and survive, or you sort of drown. I think a lot of people go into the school sector think it's actually going to be quite easy. And I think it's great to see new people come in, new energy, new ideas. There's enough schools for everybody to work through, but often I do see a quick churn of businesses because people realise how hard it is. Your brand reputation is absolutely paramount. If you have a bad reputation, you are not going to be rebooked. And word of mouth. We have a very high loyalty rate. Once people have worked with us, they stay with us, they'll take us to their next school. A lot of our international workers come through teachers in the UK who now are in China, Asia. We've done Brazil from working with us in the UK, and we've flown our speakers over there. So yeah.
Brilliant. So my final question, which is one I love to put to my guests, is I'm going to put you in my time machine. I don't know if you know that I have a time machine, and I'm going to take Claire Young now, with everything that you know and all the experience that you have, and I'm going to take you back to when you started School Speakers and ask you, what advice would you give your young self now, knowing what you know?
I would say, which is a very unusual thing because it's not my natural instinct, is to have a clear process, a booking process, paperwork, and stick to that process. Because often, so many times I've spoken to speakers where they don't have contracts, they go into schools, they don't know when they're being paid, or not necessarily schools, any type of event, they've been booked, then they end up not being paid. You just need to have a very clear operational process. Everybody in the team is on board with it, and you stick to it.
I love that. Claire, thank you. That was fantastic.
Thank you for having me.